At a family dinner, my son said, "You will eat after all of us last." All that was left for me were just scraps and bread. I endured this for months, but then I couldn't take it anymore. And good day, dear listeners. It's Louisa again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I never thought my golden years would taste like stale bread and cold leftovers. My name is Margaret, and for 67 years, I'd built a life I was proud of. My husband Robert and I raised our son David in our cozy 3-bedroom house in suburban Pennsylvania. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Robert worked as an accountant. I taught elementary school for 30 years, and together, we'd saved enough to retire with dignity. When Robert passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, the house felt enormous and empty. The silence was deafening. David called me every week after his father's funeral. "Mom, are you eating well? Are you lonely? Jessica and I worry about you." Jessica was his wife of 5 years, a polished woman who worked in marketing. They had 2 children, Emma, 7, and little Noah, 4. I'd see them on holidays, birthdays, the usual family gatherings. Everything seemed normal, loving, even. Then David made the suggestion that would change everything. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking. Our apartment is getting cramped with the kids growing. What if we moved in with you? Just temporarily, until we save enough for a bigger place. You have all that space, and we could help you with maintenance, groceries, everything. You wouldn't be alone anymore." How could I say no? The thought of having my grandchildren's laughter fill these empty rooms again made my heart swell. I imagined baking cookies with Emma, reading bedtime stories to Noah, being the grandmother I'd always wanted to be. "Of course, sweetheart. This is your home, too." They moved in on a Saturday in September. The first month was wonderful. Emma would run to hug me after school. Noah would climb into my lap while I watched television. Jessica seemed pleasant enough, always thanking me for letting them stay. David worked long hours at his software company, but he'd smile warmly when he came home to find dinner waiting. But something shifted in October. It started small. Jessica began rearranging my kitchen without asking. "Margaret, you'll find this layout much more efficient," she'd say, moving my dishes to cabinets I could barely reach. Then she started making comments about my cooking. "The kids are used to less salt, Margaret, and we're trying to eat more organic." I adjusted my recipes, trying to accommodate. Then came the first dinner that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening. I'd spent the afternoon making pot roast, Robert's favorite recipe. The smell filled the house, rich and comforting. I'd set the table for 6, placed fresh flowers in the center. When everyone gathered, I moved to sit in my usual spot at the head of the table. "Actually, Mom," David said, his voice casual but firm, "Jessica and I were thinking I should sit there. You know, as the head of the household now." I froze, my hand on the back of my chair. Head of the household? This was my house. My name was on the deed. But David's eyes had this expectant look, and Jessica was watching me with a slight smile. Emma and Noah were already seated, oblivious. "Of course," I heard myself say. I took the seat at the far end, the seat where Robert used to sit. No, where guests used to sit. Dinner began. Jessica served David first, then the children, then herself. The platter of pot roast made its way around. By the time it reached me, only the fatty edges remained. The roasted potatoes? Gone? The glazed carrots? Scraped clean. "There's bread in the kitchen, Mom," David said without looking up from his plate. I stared at my plate, at the scraps that wouldn't have been enough for a proper meal. My stomach growled. I'd been cooking since noon and hadn't eaten lunch. You'll eat after all of us in last turn, David suddenly announced, as if establishing a new house rule. We need our energy for work and school. You're retired, you can eat any time. Jessica nodded in agreement. Emma giggled, though I don't think she understood why. Noah was too focused on his food to notice my face burning with humiliation. I sat there, silent, as my family finished their meal. Then I collected the scraps and went to the kitchen. I found half a loaf of bread and made myself a dry sandwich. That night, lying in bed, I told myself it was a misunderstanding, a one-time thing. But deep down, I knew something had fundamentally changed in my own home, and I had no idea how much worse it would become. The last to eat rule wasn't a one-time thing. It became my new reality. Every single dinner, I watched my family fill their plates while I waited. David would pile his plate high. Jessica would serve the children generous portions, and by the time the dishes reached me, I was left with whatever they didn't want. Overcooked edges, cold vegetables, the smallest piece of chicken, sometimes nothing at all but bread and butter. I began losing weight. My clothes hung looser on my frame. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the tired woman staring back at me. The grandmother who used to stand tall now had a permanent stoop, as if I was physically shrinking in my own home. But it wasn't just the food. In November, Jessica informed me that my bedroom was too large for one person and that they needed it for a home office. You'd be more comfortable in the guest room, Margaret. It's cozy. Perfect for someone your age. The guest room was barely 10 by 10 feet, with a single window that overlooked the trash bins. My bedroom, the one I'd shared with Robert for 40 years, became Jessica's workspace. I could hear her on conference calls through the wall, discussing marketing strategies in the room where my husband had died. I tried to talk to David. One evening, I caught him alone in the garage. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about some things that have been happening." "Mom, not now. I've got a deadline." He didn't even look up from his phone. "David, please. It's important. I feel like I'm being what? Fed? Housed? Mom, we've been helping you. Do you know how expensive it is to maintain this place? The property taxes alone." "I pay the property taxes, David. This is my house." He finally looked at me, and something cold flashed in his eyes. "Is it? Because Jessica and I have been doing all the repairs, all the maintenance, all the work. You just exist here." The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to argue, to remind him of the mortgage I'd paid for 30 years, the rooms I'd painted, the garden I'd planted. But he'd already turned away, dismissing me. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to my old bedroom. Jessica had left her laptop open on the desk, and I could see a document on the screen. Curiosity pulled me closer. It was an email draft to a real estate attorney. Exploring options for transferring property deed, elderly owner showing signs of diminished capacity, family members currently providing full-time care. My blood ran cold. Diminished capacity? I was 67, not 90. I drove. I balanced my checkbook. I could name every president in order. What were they planning? I backed out of the room quickly, my heart pounding. Back in my tiny guest room, I sat on the narrow bed and took inventory of my situation. The facts were clear. They were isolating me, starving me, taking over my home piece by piece. And now they were planning to take the house itself, claiming I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. How long had I been tolerating this? 3 months? 4? I'd made excuses, told myself I was being sensitive, that David was just stressed from work. But this email proved everything. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as an obstacle to their inheritance. Fear gripped me. What could I do? If I confronted them, they'd gaslight me, tell me I was confused, maybe even use it as more evidence of my supposed incompetence. If I asked them to leave, they could refuse, claim they had tenant rights after living here for months, but I wasn't helpless. Not yet. I'd been a teacher for 3 decades. I'd dealt with difficult parents, navigated school bureaucracies, advocated for children who had no voice. I'd survived the Depression as a child, put myself through college, raised a family. Robert always said I was the strongest person he knew. It was time to remember that. I pulled out a notebook from my nightstand and began writing. First, I documented everything: dates, incidents, conversations. The dinner where David announced the eating order. The day Jessica took my bedroom. Every slight, every humiliation recorded in detail. Then I made a list of my assets: the house, my retirement accounts, my teacher's pension, my savings. Everything was in my name. Robert had made sure of that when he'd updated our will. Finally, I outlined a plan. Not revenge, nothing dramatic, just a series of steps to reclaim my life, my dignity, my home. Step 1. I needed proof of their intentions. That email wasn't enough. I'd seen it by accident, couldn't use it legally. Step 2. I needed allies. Someone who could witness what was happening. Someone who couldn't be dismissed as a confused old woman. Step 3. I needed to secure my assets before they could manipulate me into signing anything. As I wrote, something changed inside me. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something harder was forming. Something that tasted like anger, like determination. They thought I was weak, disposable, a burden. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Monday morning, I waited until David and Jessica left for work and the children were at school. Then I called my bank. First National Bank, how may I help you? Yes, this is Margaret Foster. I need to schedule an appointment with a financial advisor. I want to review all my accounts and make some changes. The appointment was set for Wednesday at 10 o'clock. I felt a small thrill of power making that call. This was my money, my security. They couldn't touch it without my signature. But I needed more than financial protection. I needed evidence. That afternoon, I went to Best Buy. The young man at the electronics counter looked at me curiously when I asked about recording devices. What kind of recording are you looking for, ma'am? Something small, discreet, for home security purposes. He showed me several options. I chose a simple audio recorder, small enough to fit in my cardigan pocket, with 40 hours of battery life. I paid cash. I didn't want this purchase showing up on any shared credit card statements. That evening, dinner played out as usual. I sat at the far end of the table, waiting. The recorder was running in my pocket. Jessica served David first, piling his plate with the pork chops I'd spent the afternoon preparing. Here you go, honey. You work so hard. The children got their portions. Emma chattered about her school play. Noah spilled his milk, and I started to get up to help clean it, but Jessica waved me back down. Stay seated, Margaret. You'll just get in the way. Finally, the platter reached me. One small pork chop remained, mostly gristle. 3 green beans. No mashed potatoes at all. David, I said carefully, there's not much left. Could I have a bit more from Mom? You're not as active as we are. You don't need as much food. He didn't even look up. Besides, we're thinking about your health. Smaller portions are better for seniors. I'm hungry, David. I worked in the kitchen all day preparing this meal. Jessica's voice cut in, sweet as poison. Margaret, we've discussed this. Your metabolism has slowed down. Trust me, I've read all about nutrition for elderly people. This is actually better for you. I bit my tongue and pressed the button to save the recording. Let them hear themselves later. Let a judge hear them. Wednesday arrived. At the bank, I met with Thomas Brennan, a financial advisor who'd helped Robert and me set up our retirement accounts years ago. He was in his 50s, professional, kind-eyed. "Mrs. Foster, it's good to see you. How can I help today?" "Thomas, I need your honest assessment. Are there any recent changes to my accounts? Any attempted access?" He typed on his computer, frowning. "Let me check. Actually, yes. There was an inquiry last week from a David Foster, claiming to be your son, asking about adding his name to your primary checking account. We didn't proceed because we need you here in person for that kind of change." My hands clenched in my lap. "What reason did he give?" "He said you were having trouble managing your finances and he wanted to help. Is that accurate?" "No. I manage my finances perfectly well, and I don't want anyone added to my accounts." "Understood." Thomas made a note. "Mrs. Foster, is everything all right? You seem concerned." I made a decision in that moment. "Thomas, I need to protect my assets. My son and his family moved in with me, and I'm beginning to suspect they have plans to take control of my property and finances. I need to make sure that can't happen." His expression turned serious. "Have they been pressuring you? Threatening you?" "Nothing that direct, it's more subtle. But I found an email about transferring my property deed, claiming diminished capacity. That's elder financial abuse, Mrs. Foster. You should consider speaking with an attorney." The word abuse made it real. That's what this was. Abuse. "Can you recommend someone?" He wrote down a name and number. "Patricia Chen. She specializes in elder law and estate protection. She's excellent." I left the bank with my accounts secured, passwords changed, alerts set up for any attempted access, and an appointment with Patricia Chen scheduled for Friday. When I got home, Jessica was there, which was unusual. She normally worked until 5. "Margaret, where were you?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. "I had some errands to run." "What kind of errands?" "Personal ones." She smiled tightly. "We're family, Margaret. We don't keep secrets." "Where did you go?" Something in me snapped. "Jessica, I'm 67 years old. I don't answer to you." Her smile vanished. "Fine. Be that way. But just so you know, David and I have been discussing your behavior lately. You seem confused, forgetful. Maybe it's time we talked about getting you evaluated by a doctor." There it was. The threat barely veiled. "I'm not confused, and I'm not forgetful. I know exactly what's happening." "Do you?" She stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, you're an elderly woman living alone in a house too big for her, struggling to take care of herself. Lucky for you, we're here to help." "This is my house, Jessica." "For now," she said softly. Then she turned and walked upstairs. I stood in the hallway, shaking. They knew I was onto them, and they were preparing to fight back. Friday couldn't come fast enough. Patricia Chen's office was in a modern building downtown. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with short black hair and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. I told her everything: the eating arrangements, the bedroom takeover, the email I'd seen, David's attempt to access my bank accounts, Jessica's threats about medical evaluations. I played her the audio recording from dinner. Her expression grew darker with each word. "Mrs. Foster, this is textbook elder abuse, financial exploitation, isolation, intimidation. How long has this been going on?" 4 months, maybe 5 now." "And you own the house outright?" "Yes, my husband and I paid off the mortgage 15 years ago." She made notes. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm filing for a restraining order if things escalate. Second, we're drafting a formal notice requiring them to vacate the property. Under Pennsylvania law, even family members become tenants after 30 days, so we'll need to follow proper eviction procedures. Third, I'm recommending you get a complete medical evaluation from an independent physician to document your mental competency. They're threatening to claim you're incompetent. We'll prove otherwise. How long will this take? The eviction process, if they contest it, could take 60 to 90 days. But we'll start immediately. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. But when I got home that evening, David and Jessica were waiting for me in the living room. Both of them. Together. Their expressions were cold. "Mom, sit down," David said. "We need to talk." I remained standing. "About what?" "About your little trip to see a lawyer today." My blood froze. How did they know? Jessica smiled, holding up her phone. "You're on my phone's family tracking app, Margaret. I added you months ago, remember? For safety reasons? I can see everywhere you go." I'd completely forgotten about that. She'd convinced me to install it after Robert died, saying they worried about me driving alone. David leaned forward. "So, you're planning to kick us out? Your own family? Your own son? You've been trying to steal my house." "Steal?" Jessica laughed. "Margaret, we've been supporting you, paying for groceries, utilities, maintenance." "I pay the utilities. I pay the property taxes." "And we pay for everything else?" David shot back. "Mom, face it. You can't manage this place alone. You're getting older, more confused. We're trying to help you, and you're treating us like criminals. You tried to access my bank accounts without my permission. Because you kept forgetting to pay bills." David stood up, his face reddening. "Do you know how many times the electric company called because you missed payments?" That was a lie. I'd never missed a payment in my life. But the way he said it, so confidently, made me doubt myself for a split second. Was I forgetting things? No. This was manipulation. Gaslighting. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my house. You have 30 days. I'm formally evicting you." Jessica's mask slipped entirely. "You can't do that. We have rights. And once we tell the court about your mental state, about how you're paranoid and irrational, no judge will side with you. We'll get guardianship, Margaret. We'll have you declared incompetent, and then we'll decide what happens to this house." "Try it," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I have a lawyer. I have documentation, and I'm getting a medical evaluation to prove I'm completely competent." David grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. "Mom, you're making a huge mistake. If you do this, you'll have no one, no family. You'll die alone in some nursing home." I pulled my arm free. "If that's my choice, it's better than living like a servant in my own house." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." They stormed out. I heard their bedroom door slam upstairs. I sat down, my whole body trembling. I'd done it. I'd stood up to them. But Jessica's threat echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this." What would they do now? That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. I kept my bedroom door locked and my phone beside my pillow. The next morning, I found my car keys missing. I searched everywhere: my purse, the kitchen counter, my coat pockets. Gone. When David came down for breakfast, I confronted him. "Where are my keys?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "David, I need my car." "Maybe you misplaced them. You know how forgetful you've been getting." That smile again. Pitying. Condescending. They were trapping me. Isolating me. Making it harder for me to leave, to see my lawyer, to get help. But I wasn't helpless. I called Patricia Chen from my bedroom. "They took my car keys. They're trying to prevent me from leaving the house. That's unlawful imprisonment." "Mrs. Foster, I think you need to consider staying somewhere else until the eviction is complete. Do you have friends or family nearby?" Did I? I'd been so isolated I'd barely seen anyone in months. But then I remembered. Sharon, my neighbor from 3 houses down. We used to have coffee together before David moved in. I might have somewhere to go. Good. Pack a bag. Get out today if you can. And Mrs. Foster? Be careful. People in their position can become desperate. After I hung up, I sat on my bed and allowed myself a moment of rest. Just a few days. I needed a few days to breathe, to plan my next move without them watching my every step. I could do this. I had to. I waited until David and Jessica both left for work before I made my move. I packed a small suitcase with essentials, clothes, toiletries, my important documents, the audio recorder. My hands shook as I folded each item, but my resolve was ice cold. Finding my spare car keys in the garage lockbox, I loaded my suitcase into my sedan and drove 3 houses down to Sharon's place. Sharon answered the door in her gardening gloves, her gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw my face, her smile faded. "Margaret, what's wrong?" I broke down right there on her doorstep. Sharon brought me inside, made tea, and listened. I told her everything. The months of humiliation, the stolen meals, the threats, the attempts to access my finances. She held my hand and let me cry. "I knew something was wrong," she said finally. "You stopped coming to our coffee mornings. I'd see you in the yard sometimes, and you looked so diminished. I almost came over several times, but I didn't want to intrude. I wish you had." "Well, I'm here now. You'll stay in my guest room as long as you need." That evening, my phone rang. David. "Mom, where are you? We came home and you're gone. Your car's gone. We're worried sick." The concern in his voice was almost convincing. Almost. "I'm staying with a friend." "What friend?" "Mom, please. Come home. We can talk about this. I know things have been tense, but we can work it out." "There's nothing to work out, David. You have 30 days to find another place." "Mom," I hung up. 10 minutes later, Jessica called. "Margaret, please. David is devastated. He loves you so much, and you're breaking his heart. Can we please just sit down and talk? We're family." "Family doesn't try to steal from each other, Jessica." "Steal? Is that what your lawyer told you?" "Margaret, we've never tried to steal anything. We've been trying to help you. You've been so confused lately, and we've been covering for you, trying to protect you." "Goodbye, Jessica." She called back 3 more times. I didn't answer. The next morning, they showed up at Sharon's house. I watched from the upstairs window as David knocked on the door. Sharon answered, her face stern. "She doesn't want to see you," I heard Sharon say. "With all due respect, ma'am, this is between me and my mother." "Mom," David called out. "Mom, please, just 5 minutes." Jessica stood behind him, looking tearful. A perfect performance. I opened the window. "David, go home." "Mom, please. The kids miss you. Emma cries every night asking where Grandma went. Is that what you want? To abandon your grandchildren?" The guilt hit like a physical blow. Emma. Noah. I hadn't thought about how this would affect them. They were innocent in all of this. "You're using your children as weapons," I called down, my voice breaking. "That's low, even for you. I'm telling you the truth. Come see for yourself. Come have dinner with us. Just one dinner. If you still want to go through with this afterward, fine. But give your grandchildren a chance to see their grandmother." I hesitated. Sharon looked up at me, shaking her head slightly. But the image of Emma crying, of little Noah confused and missing me, it weakened my resolve. "One dinner," I heard myself say, "tomorrow night, but I'm not moving back in." That night, Sharon sat me down in her living room. "Margaret, you can't go. This is a trap. They're right about one thing. The children are innocent. I should at least say goodbye to them properly. Then let them bring Emma and Noah here. Don't go into that house." She was right. I knew she was right. but part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, David would remember who he used to be. The sweet boy who brought me flowers on Mother's Day, who called me every week after his father died. I'll be careful, I promised. The next evening, I drove to my own house feeling like I was approaching enemy territory. David answered the door with a warm smile. "Mom, thank you for coming." Inside, the house smelled like pot roast. My recipe. The table was set beautifully with the good china, my good china, and fresh flowers. Emma ran to hug me. "Grandma, I missed you so much." I held her tight, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Noah toddled over, and I scooped him up. For a moment, everything felt normal, like family. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron. "Margaret, welcome home. I made your favorite." The word home was deliberate, pointed. We sat down to dinner. This time, David served me first. A generous portion of pot roast, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes. "See, Mom?" David said softly. "We can change. We heard you. We're listening." I looked at the plate in front of me, at my grandchildren's happy faces, at David's hopeful expression, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was the temptation. This was them showing me what I'd lose if I continued fighting them. They were offering me the illusion of peace, of family, of belonging. All I had to do was surrender. I picked up my fork, took a bite of pot roast. It was good, perfect actually. "This is lovely," I said calmly. "Thank you for the meal." Jessica beamed. "So, will you come home?" I set down my fork. "No." The smile froze on her face. "This doesn't change anything," I continued. "You've shown me you can be kind when it suits you, but I know what happens when I don't suit you anymore. I know what you're capable of." David's face darkened. "Mom." "Thank you for dinner. Emma, Noah, Grandma loves you very much. I'm going to make sure I can see you both, but not here, not like this." I stood up and walked to the door. My legs felt steady. My mind was clear. Behind me, I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and cold. "You're going to regret this, Margaret." But as I drove back to Sharon's house, I realized something. I didn't regret it at all. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I spent the next week at Sharon's house, regaining my strength. I ate proper meals, slept in a comfortable bed, and began to remember what it felt like to be treated with respect. Sharon became my ally, my witness, my friend. She drove me to my medical evaluation with Dr. Harrison, an independent physician Patricia had recommended. Dr. Harrison put me through a comprehensive assessment, cognitive tests, memory evaluations, physical examination. At the end, he looked at me over his glasses and said, "Mrs. Foster, you're in excellent mental and physical health for your age. There's absolutely no evidence of diminished capacity or cognitive decline. I'll have my report sent to your attorney." I could have cried with relief, but my peace was short-lived. On Saturday morning, Sharon's doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw David's car in the driveway, but this time, he'd brought reinforcements. Sharon opened the door to find David, Jessica, and an older woman I didn't recognize. Mid-70s, expensively dressed, with David's same sharp eyes. "Who are you?" Sharon asked. "I'm Diane Foster, David's mother-in-law," the woman said in a crisp voice. "We're here to speak with Margaret." I came to the door. "What do you want?" Diane smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Margaret, dear, may we come in? I've heard so much about this unfortunate situation, and I think I can help mediate." Sharon looked at me. I nodded reluctantly. We all moved to the living room, the tension thick enough to cut. Diane sat down gracefully and folded her hands. "Margaret, I understand you've been going through a difficult time. Losing a spouse is incredibly hard, and sometimes we don't make the best decisions when we're grieving. I'm not grieving anymore, I said coldly, and my decisions are sound. Of course. But I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. David and Jessica are genuinely trying to help you. They've put their own lives on hold to care for you. They tried to steal my house. Diane's smile tightened. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have proof? I thought of the email I'd seen but couldn't legally use. I stayed silent. I didn't think so, Diane continued smoothly. Margaret, I'm going to be frank with you. I'm a retired family court judge. I know how these situations play out. If you continue down this path, evicting your own family, making baseless accusations, it's going to look very bad for you. Courts don't look kindly on elderly people who turn against family members trying to help them. Is that a threat? It's reality. She leaned forward. But here's what I'm proposing. A compromise. You drop the eviction. David and Jessica agree to pay you modest rent. You all work with a family therapist to rebuild trust. Everyone wins. Except I'd still be living as a prisoner in my own home. Jessica spoke up, her voice quavering. Margaret, please. Think of Emma and Noah. They love you. Don't you want to be part of their lives? Don't use those children as shields, I said sharply. David stood up, his face flushed. Mom, enough. We've tried to be nice. We've tried to compromise, but you're being stubborn and paranoid and, frankly, senile. Watch your mouth, Sharon cut in, her voice like steel. David ignored her, focusing on me. Here's what's going to happen. If you don't drop this eviction, we're filing a petition for guardianship. Diane knows judges. We have documentation of your erratic behavior, leaving your home without telling anyone, making wild accusations, isolating yourself from family. We'll have you declared incompetent, and then we'll decide what happens to you and your assets. There it was, the mask fully off. Not reconciliation at all, but a final ultimatum. Diane smiled again. Or you can be reasonable. Come home, drop the legal action, and we'll all move forward as a family. What do you say, Margaret? I looked at the three of them. David, who I'd raised and loved, now looking at me with cold calculation. Jessica, who'd never seen me as anything but an obstacle to her comfort. And Diane, a stranger, weaponizing her legal knowledge to threaten me. Get out of Sharon's house, I said quietly. Margaret, David started. Get out! The force of my voice surprised even me. Sharon stood up, positioning herself beside me. You heard her, Sharon said. Leave, now. Jessica's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, Margaret. When you're sitting in a nursing home with nothing, remember that we gave you a chance. I'd rather have nothing than live under your roof, I said. They left, Diane's parting look full of promises of retribution. After the door closed, I sat down, shaking. Sharon put her arm around me. They're scared, she said. That's why they came with the mother-in-law. They're losing control and they know it. They threatened guardianship. Let them try. You have a doctor's evaluation proving you're competent. You have documentation of their abuse. Patricia will fight it. She was right, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid. The look in David's eyes, that anger, that entitlement, it was the look of someone who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. But neither would I. The war was truly beginning, and I was ready. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Patricia had warned me it would be brutal. They're going to paint you as confused, isolated, paranoid. They'll twist every piece of evidence to make you look incompetent. But we have Dr. Harrison's evaluation, your financial records showing perfect management, and your audio recordings. Stay calm, stay factual, and we'll win this. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in my best Navy suit, the one I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences. Sharon drove me to the courthouse, squeezing my hand before I went inside. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, presided. David and Jessica sat with their attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit. Diane sat behind them, watching me like a hawk. David's attorney went first. He painted a picture of a deteriorating old woman, forgetting to pay bills, making paranoid accusations, abandoning her family without explanation, refusing help from loving relatives. Your Honor, Mr. and Mrs. Foster have been nothing but supportive. They moved in to care for Mrs. Margaret Foster when she became unable to manage her home. They've paid for groceries, maintenance, utilities, all while she accused them of theft and abuse. This behavior indicates clear cognitive decline. Then they called David to the stand. He looked the part of the concerned son perfectly. Your Honor, I love my mother. After Dad died, she fell apart. We moved in because we were worried about her living alone. At first, she seemed grateful, but then she started becoming paranoid, accusing us of stealing, hiding her car keys, which she'd actually just misplaced. She disappeared for days without telling us. We were terrified something had happened to her. Mr. Foster, did you attempt to access your mother's bank accounts? Patricia asked during cross-examination, only to help her pay bills. She'd forgotten several times, and we were worried about her credit. Do you have documentation of these missed payments? He hesitated. No, but because Mrs. Foster's bank records show no missed payments in the past 5 years. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. She must have caught them at the last minute. Or perhaps you're lying. Objection! David's attorney stood up. Withdrawn, Patricia said smoothly. Mr. Foster, why did your wife, Jessica, send an email to a real estate attorney discussing transferring your mother's property deed? The courtroom went silent. David's face paled. I don't know anything about that. Patricia produced a printed copy of the email. This was sent from Jessica Foster's email address, discussing options for claiming your mother showed diminished capacity and transferring her property. Were you aware of this communication? No, I mean, Jessica might have been researching options for the future, in case Mom ever needed more care. So you were planning to take her home? Not take, manage, for her own good. Against her will. She wasn't thinking clearly. According to whom? Dr. Harrison evaluated her and found zero evidence of cognitive decline. Her finances are immaculate. Her medical records show she's in excellent health. Where's your evidence of incompetence, Mr. Foster? David's composure cracked. She turned against her own family. What kind of person does that? We were helping her, and You were starving her, Patricia cut in, making her eat table scraps while you had full meals. That's not... Patricia played the audio recording. David's voice filled the courtroom. You'll eat after all of us, in last turn. We need our energy for work and school. You're retired. You can eat anytime. Judge Morrison's expression grew cold as she listened. Jessica was called next. She cried on the stand, claiming they'd only wanted to help, that I'd misunderstood everything, that the email was taken out of context. Mrs. Foster, did you tell Margaret she would regret pursuing legal action against you? Patricia asked. I was emotional. I didn't mean... Did you tell her you'd have her declared incompetent and take guardianship? No. Well, maybe in frustration, but... Did you take her car keys to prevent her from leaving the house? I never. David might have moved them by accident. Accident? Jessica's story fell apart under questioning. She contradicted herself multiple times, got defensive, and eventually broke down crying, which only made her look more manipulative. Finally, I took the stand. I spoke calmly, clearly. I explained the months of abuse, the manipulation, the threats. I presented my financial records, my medical evaluation, my documentation. Mrs. Foster, Judge Morrison asked, why do you think your son and daughter-in-law behaved this way? They wanted my house, Your Honor. They saw me as an obstacle to their inheritance. They thought they could break me down, make me doubt myself, and take everything I'd worked my whole life to build. And how do you feel about your son now? I looked at David. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I love him, I said quietly. He's my son, and I always will love him. But I don't trust him, and I won't allow him to destroy me. Judge Morrison reviewed her notes. The silence stretched unbearably. Finally, she looked up. Petition for guardianship denied. Mrs. Margaret Foster has demonstrated complete mental competency. Furthermore, I'm finding evidence of elder abuse and financial exploitation. The eviction order stands. Mr. and Mrs. Foster, you have 30 days to vacate the property. I'm also ordering a restraining order. You're to have no contact with Mrs. Margaret Foster except through attorneys. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. I'd won. David and Jessica didn't leave quietly. On day 29 of their eviction notice, they were still in my house. Patricia filed for sheriff-assisted eviction. On the morning of day 30, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived with a court order. I stood across the street with Sharon, watching as David and Jessica loaded boxes into a rental truck. Jessica's face was red and blotchy from crying. David moved mechanically, refusing to look in my direction. The deputies supervised every item removed, ensuring nothing of mine disappeared. Patricia had provided them with a detailed inventory of my belongings, photos of every room, documentation of everything. When Jessica tried to take the good china, my wedding china, one of the deputies stopped her. Ma'am, that's listed as Mrs. Foster's property. It's family china. It should go to David. Ma'am, please put it back. Jessica slammed the box down so hard I heard something shatter inside. She didn't care. She just wanted to hurt me however she could. Emma and Noah were at school. David had arranged that much at least, sparing them the trauma of watching their parents be evicted. I'd already spoken with my lawyer about grandparents' rights. I would see those children again, but on my terms, in safe circumstances. By noon, the truck was loaded. David approached the deputies. Can I speak to my mother, just for 1 minute? They looked at me. I nodded, though my heart raced. David walked over, keeping the distance required by the restraining order. Up close, he looked exhausted. Older. I hope you're happy, Mom, he said quietly. You got what you wanted. I wanted my home and my dignity back, that's all. We needed that house. Do you understand? We've been living in that cramped apartment for years, barely making ends meet. You had all this space, all this money, just sitting there while you were alone. So you thought you'd take it, without asking, by making me feel worthless? We would have taken care of you, as your servant, eating scraps while you enjoyed meals I cooked. David, you made me feel like I was nothing. His jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. Family is everything, and you're throwing us away. You threw me away first. You just didn't expect me to notice. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or just anger that his plan had failed. Goodbye, Mom. He walked back to the truck. Jessica shot me one last venomous look before climbing into the passenger seat. The truck pulled away, and I watched until it disappeared around the corner. One of the deputies handed me my house keys. All clear, ma'am. The locks have been changed as you requested. Here are your new keys. I held them in my hand, these small pieces of metal that represented my freedom. Thank you. Sharon and I walked to the front door together. I unlocked it, my lock, my key, my house, and stepped inside. The house was a mess. They'd left garbage in the kitchen, stains on the carpets, holes in the walls where they'd hung pictures. The guest room where I'd been sleeping was trashed. But it was mine again. Over the next week, I hired cleaners, painters, repairmen. I reclaimed my bedroom, sleeping in my own bed for the first time in months. I hung my photographs back on the walls. I cooked meals in my kitchen and ate them at my table, sitting at the head where I belonged. Patricia helped me update my will. David was still my beneficiary, he was still my son, but with strict conditions. The house couldn't be sold for at least 20 years after my death. A portion would be set aside in trust for Emma and Noah's education. David would get what remained, but only after provisions were made for others. I also established a healthcare directive and power of attorney, appointing Patricia and Sharon as my decision-makers if I ever became truly incapacitated. Never again would David have the opportunity to claim guardianship. The legal fees were substantial, but worth every penny. 1 month after the eviction, I received a letter from Jessica. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You won. I hope you enjoyed dying alone in that house. Emma and Noah ask about you, but we tell them Grandma doesn't want to see them anymore. That's on you." I crumpled the letter and threw it away. Then I called my lawyer about filing for grandparents' visitation rights. 3 months later, a court granted me supervised visitation with Emma and Noah twice a month. The first visit, at a family services center, Emma ran into my arms. "Grandma, Daddy said you didn't want to see us anymore." "That was never true, sweetheart. Grandma loves you both so much." I'd won more than my house back. I'd won my life back, my dignity, my self-respect. And I was just getting started. 6 months after the eviction, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. I started volunteering at the local senior center, teaching financial literacy classes. Turns out, my experience with elder abuse wasn't unique. I met dozens of other seniors who'd faced similar situations with their families. Children who saw their parents as ATMs, relatives who used guilt and manipulation to take control of assets. I helped them find resources, connect with attorneys, document abuse. I became an advocate. Sharon and I formed a weekly coffee group with 5 other women from the neighborhood. We called ourselves the Golden Girls, though we laughed that we were more like the Silver Warriors. We supported each other, shared stories, reminded each other that growing older didn't mean becoming invisible or powerless. I renovated the house, turning David's old bedroom into a craft room and the guest room into a proper library. I planted a new garden, joined a book club, started taking watercolor painting classes. For the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I was living for myself. My visits with Emma and Noah continued. The supervised visitation eventually became unsupervised weekend visits at my house. I'd pick them up on Saturday mornings, and we'd bake cookies, work on puzzles, read stories. They never mentioned their parents' situation, and I never asked. I just focused on being their grandmother, giving them stability and love. But through small comments the children made, I pieced together what was happening in David and Jessica's life. They'd moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. "Daddy's new place is really small," Noah had said once. "We have to share a room, and Mommy says we can't make noise because the neighbors complain." David had been laid off from his software job. Emma mentioned it casually. "Daddy stays home now during the day. He's looking for work." Jessica's marketing career wasn't going well either. "Mommy's always on her phone talking to people about jobs," Emma had told me. "She gets really mad when they say no." I didn't take pleasure in their struggles, but I didn't feel guilty either. They'd made their choices. They'd tried to destroy me to get what they wanted, and now they were living with the consequences. Then, about 8 months after the eviction, I ran into Diane, Jessica's mother, at the grocery store. She looked older, tired. When she saw me, she actually approached. "Margaret." "Diane?" An awkward silence stretched between us. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "I believed Jessica's version of events. I thought you were being unreasonable, but I've seen how they've been since they moved out. The way Jessica talks about you, the bitterness, the entitlement. I understand now what you were dealing with." I didn't know what to say. David lost his job because he was spending so much time on personal matters during work hours, trying to fight your eviction, meeting with lawyers. Jessica alienated several clients with her attitude and was let go. They're struggling financially, and instead of taking responsibility, they blame you for everything. That's not my problem anymore, Diane. I know, and it shouldn't be. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you fought back. Jessica told me you'd just give up eventually, that you were too old, too weak to stand up to them. I'm glad she was wrong. After she left, I stood in the produce aisle for a long moment, processing the conversation. David and Jessica had lost everything they'd tried to steal from me. Their jobs, their stability, their comfortable life. And instead of learning from it, they were still playing the victim, still blaming me. Meanwhile, my life had never been better. I'd reconnected with old friends from my teaching days. I'd started dating. Nothing serious, just coffee dates with a retired professor named George who made me laugh. I'd even traveled, taking a cruise to Alaska I'd always dreamed about. The house that David and Jessica had coveted so desperately became a gathering place. I hosted Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people, friends, neighbors, even Patricia and her family. My table was full of laughter and warmth. On Christmas, Emma and Noah came for the weekend. We decorated a tree, made gingerbread houses, watched holiday movies. When I dropped them off Sunday night, David answered the door. He looked at the happy, sugar-high children, then at me. They had fun, I said simply. He nodded, his face unreadable. Thanks for seeing them. They're my grandchildren. I'll always see them. As I drove home, I realized I felt no anger toward David anymore. No hurt, no resentment. Just a calm acceptance of what was. He was my son, and I still loved him. But I loved myself more. And that made all the difference. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Built on my terms, filled with people who respected me, grounded in the dignity I'd fought so hard to reclaim. I'd won more than a court case. I'd won my freedom. And God, it felt good. So that's my story. The story of how I went from eating scraps at my own table to reclaiming my life. The lesson? Never let anyone, not even family, make you feel worthless. Your dignity isn't negotiable. Your home, your peace, your self-respect, they're worth fighting for, no matter how hard the battle gets. If you're going through something similar, please, document everything, find your allies, and don't give up. You deserve better than scraps and silence. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back sooner, or would you have kept enduring, hoping things would change? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself. Never.